President Obama coming out last night, a little after 10 o'clock on the East Coast. He called for calm as violence simultaneously raged on the screen next to him in the streets of Ferguson.
There are Americans who agree with it, and there are Americans who are deeply disappointed, even angry. It's an understandable reaction. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully.
Bob Beckel is a former Democratic campaign manager and co-host of The Five, Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, and a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, welcome. I don't know what your reaction was. I was home last night watching that, and as the president was calling for calm on one side of the screen, on the other side, protesters were rocking a police car and setting things on fire. It was just a stunning juxtaposition.
Well, I think it was anticipated, and let's remember that a large majority, the vast majority of people who protested in Ferguson were not violent, were not burning things down. They were people who believed, and whether they had the facts, they don't think the facts were presented right, they believed that this guy was guilty of murder to begin with. That was an issue with them. Now, you could say that's wrong, they should have all the facts, but when you live in a community like that, where the schools are worse, the infrastructure is worse, and they have a police department that is incompetent, then I think you're probably going to have to draw that conclusion.
Yeah, I want to get to the broader point that you bring up, but I do want to get Rich's reaction, because do you think the White House was aware that it would look like that? Because they had to know that cable news is going to put the president against the live shot, and there's no problem. I mean, that was the news that was happening at that moment.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't think about it because it was bizarre. And you have people trying to overturn a police car at the very same time he's making this plea for calm. Now, what he said, I had no problem with. He made a very eloquent plea for calm and made the very important point that poor neighborhoods are in desperate need of good policing, much more than affluent communities. And that's why the police are disproportionately at work. This is a point Rudy Giuliani made the other day, in tough and dangerous neighborhoods, because that's where the crime is.
In terms of how the White House is handling this, Bob, there's a Department of Justice investigation that is ongoing, and they could potentially come up with a different answer to this question, no doubt, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is much bigger than Wilson. I will say this, that his attorney last night issuing a statement on his behalf and not mentioning this kid or his family was just out and out terrible. I mean, the guy understands some sensitivity, which he clearly doesn't. And, by the way, the prosecutor's rant about cable news and social networking.
I believe he did talk about the tragedy of the lawsuit.
No, repeatedly called it a tragedy.
The attorney, I read it this morning. I didn't see any mention of him. I don't think he mentioned it.
McCullough, the prosecutor.
No. I'm talking about the attorney for Wilson. Okay. He did not mention Michael Brown's name. But anyway, the issue still gets back to the point about did the White House not anticipate this? I don't know how they couldn't have. I mean, there was enough buildup down there, and there were enough forces on the street, and tensions were high enough where you would have expected it would have had. So they either decided they're going to do it anyway, or it was a miscalculation. I can't tell. I wasn't there. But I can tell you this. It doesn't put an end to it. That's the problem. I mean, it's not just here. I mean, across the country, last night in New York City, 3 bridges were blocked. It tells you there's an underlying resentment in poor minority communities. And in Ferguson, in Rudy Giuliani's point, they have a lot of black officers in the city who could go into poor communities. In Ferguson, they don't.
Understood. But the problem is you cannot extrapolate. You can't make this situation stand for all of that, Bob.
No, that's true.
You can't. You have to deal with the facts on the ground, and that's what the prosecutor was delineating
you have
point by point.
A whole protest movement based on, at worst, a lie, and at best an erroneous understanding of what happened in this case. If it were really true that Michael Brown had kneeled down on the ground, put his arms up, and said, "Don't shoot," he would almost certainly be alive today. Instead, all the credible evidence suggests he attacked the police officer, he tried to take his gun, and then he repeatedly charged him. And that's why this terrible tragedy happened, and that's what the people on the streets and so many people on the left won't accept. They won't accept those facts, which clearly show this was an justifiable act of self-defense.
Rich, but you haven't had to live in that community and be subject to stops by police. 98% of all stops in that city are done against blacks. I mean, this is an ongoing issue.
That doesn't mean that Michael Brown put his hands up and said, "Don't shoot."
And it doesn't mean that Darren Wilson should have to pay for the greater evils that you're referring to, nor should these store owners who now no longer have a business.
Listen, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that it underscores the resentment in these communities, and it may not. You may not agree with the facts. They never believe the facts. facts. They don't believe
That's the problem. They don't believe the facts,
well,
and then they burn down innocent mom-and-pop businesses. This beauty world,
we
beauty
gotta go, guys.
A very small percentage of them.
We'll continue our conversation in the break. In the meantime, I'm going to send it back to Bill.